I was in the back hallway of the Capitol, sipping bitter coffee from a foam cup, when I heard the phrase that changed everything, "It's in the supplemental, he just never declared it." I turned. A junior aide from the Ethics Committee was speaking too loudly on the phone, pacing fast with nerves that clearly outmatched her experience. "Who didn't declare what?" I asked, stepping closer. The aide froze. Eyes wide. "Congresswoman Crockett, I didn't mean, who didn't declare what." That's when she handed me the file. Thin, stapled, and watermarked. Johnson. He falsified the funding record tied to the committee vote. Mike Johnson. Speaker of the House. The man who'd lectured me on transparency just 2 days ago on national television. And now I had a document in my hand with his name, signature, and a direct contradiction of his public statement. The lie wasn't just bad, it was career-ending. I glanced at the clock. I had 2 hours before the Oversight Committee went live. And I was about to burn the whole illusion down. I sat alone in my office, lights dimmed, the Capitol buzzing faintly outside my door. The file sat on my desk like a loaded weapon, because that's exactly what it was. Johnson had claimed, under oath, that he hadn't received any external funding tied to the controversial Commerce Bill. But here it was. A documented transfer, routed through a shell consultancy in Baton Rouge. Dates matched. Amounts matched. His signature matched. This wasn't a technical oversight. This was a calculated lie. I tapped the intercom. "Janine, schedule a press slot for noon. And call C-SPAN. I want it aired live." There was a pause. "You're going public?" I stared at the folder. "He's been playing everyone like they're stupid." "Not anymore." That's when I heard it, a knock at my door. Mike Johnson. I opened it slow. He looked smug, arms folded, that same smirk he wore every time he underestimated me on the floor. "Heard you've been snooping around, Crockett. Careful. You don't want to start a fire you can't put out." I smiled coldly and turned back toward my desk. Too late. The match is already lit. At 11:58 a.m., the cameras were rolling. The chamber was half full but buzzing, staffers whispering, reporters clutching notepads, and members of Congress sensing something was off. Something big. I stepped to the podium, holding nothing but the thin manila folder. My voice was steady, but inside, I was steel and fire. "Mr. Speaker, Johnson made a claim last week, on this floor, and on national television, that he never received outside influence on the Commerce Committee vote." I held the document up. "That was a lie." Gasps. Murmurs. I opened the folder and began to read. On February 16, a payment of $125,000 was routed to Bainfield Consulting, a shell company operating out of a closed hardware store in Louisiana. That payment was traced back to an interest group that directly benefited from the bill Johnson pushed through 3 days later. And then I dropped the bomb. The signature authorizing that transaction, dated and notarized, is Mike Johnson's. The room erupted. Shouting. Reporters standing. Johnson wasn't even in the chamber. But by the time I finished reading, he wouldn't need to be. Because every major network had just aired the beginning of his political collapse. By 12:30 p.m., Mike Johnson's office had gone dark, figuratively and literally. Staffers were seen pulling down blinds. Phones went to voicemail. Reporters swarmed the hall, and I watched from the media lounge as every cable news ticker lit up with one headline: Crockett exposes Speaker Johnson's financial deception, ethics inquiry imminent. Johnson finally emerged at 1:12 p.m. for a hastily thrown-together press conference. He looked pale, jaw tight, flanked by aides who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "These accusations are baseless. Congresswoman Crockett is clearly grandstanding. I have never accepted improper funding, this is a coordinated smear job." A reporter cut in. "Sir, do you deny the signature on the Bainfield transfer form is yours?" He hesitated. Blinked. "I haven't seen the document." Too late. Within an hour, Representative Sanchez from the Ethics Committee called for a formal investigation. And I got a quiet message from a Republican staffer I knew well: "He's done, Jasmine. They're already discussing who replaces him." By the time the Ethics Committee convened an emergency session that evening, Johnson's allies were already peeling away like paint in a fire. I was called in at 6:45 p.m. to present the evidence, formally. The room was cold and tense. Cameras were banned, but eyes were sharper than lenses. Half the committee leaned forward like they already knew what I had. The other half looked like they were praying it wasn't true. I laid the document on the table. "This isn't political. This is factual." The signature was verified by 2 forensic analysts. The transaction is real. The shell company exists. And the vote Johnson pushed benefited the exact donor group behind the money. No one interrupted. Not even the Republicans. Representative Callahan, a longtime Johnson supporter, leaned back and folded his arms. "Why now?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Because I'm done watching lies win just because they're louder." An hour later, the committee voted, unanimous, to launch a full-scale ethics investigation into Speaker Mike Johnson. Outside, the Capitol steps were flooded with press. But I didn't stop for them. Because the Speaker's office lights were still off. And in Washington, darkness like that meant only one thing: he knew it was over. The next morning, D.C. woke up to headlines that didn't pull punches: Speaker Johnson under ethics investigation, Crockett's evidence rock solid, Republicans splinter as leadership crisis unfolds. In the halls of Congress, the tone had shifted. Johnson no longer walked with a posse. No nods. No backslaps. Just silence. Avoidance. Whispers that ended when he entered a room. By midday, 4 GOP House members issued a joint statement calling for his temporary resignation pending the outcome of the investigation. And then the real hammer dropped. At 3:42 p.m., the Washington Sentinel released an exclusive: a former Bainfield associate had come forward under whistleblower protection. Audio. Documents. Email chains. All pointing directly to Johnson. He wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating the entire scheme. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. A voice I hadn't heard in weeks: "You didn't just expose him, Jasmine. You triggered something bigger." I paused. "Who is this?" The voice answered, "Let's just say Johnson wasn't the only one." The voice hung in my ear like smoke. "You want real impact? Look deeper." Bainfield was just the entry point. Before I could respond, the call ended. I sat in silence, staring at the map of donor networks my team had pinned up weeks ago. We had focused on Johnson, he was the most visible. But that tip suggested something bigger. More layered. More dangerous. I called my chief of staff. "We're reopening every vote Johnson's backed in the last 2 years. I want to trace every cent. Every shell firm. Every co-sponsor." She hesitated. "You think it's a network?" "I don't think, I know." Meanwhile, Johnson was unraveling. Reporters ambushed him outside his townhouse. He refused to answer. His usual cable allies didn't return his calls. And 2 powerful donors quietly scrubbed his name from their PAC's homepage. But then came the twist no one saw coming. The House Oversight Committee issued subpoenas to 3 sitting representatives, all tied to the same funding stream as Johnson. Suddenly, I wasn't just the woman who exposed a lie. I was the woman who'd ignited a reckoning. By Thursday morning, I knew the backlash was coming. Johnson's team went into full retaliation mode. Smears, doctored clips, whisper campaigns, anything to discredit me. Suddenly, right-wing media painted me as vindictive, unstable, even dangerous to democracy. I didn't flinch. Because that morning, I received something stronger than all their spin, an internal email leak. Sent from Johnson's senior advisor to 2 committee members, it read, "We need to shut this down. Pressure Crockett. Dredge up anything. If she keeps digging, we're all exposed." It wasn't just desperate. It was witness tampering. I forwarded the email straight to the Ethics Committee, then walked onto the House floor, folder in hand, again. This time, I didn't speak with fire. I spoke with facts. When those in power respond to truth with threats, we know we're hitting the right nerve. And I will not be intimidated into silence. The chamber was dead quiet. Even Johnson, slouched in the back row, didn't raise his eyes. The lie was no longer just his. It was a contagion. And I had just made myself immune to every tactic they had left. By the weekend, Johnson's downfall was no longer a matter of if, it was how soon. The whistleblower's testimony was set for Monday. 3 representatives had already temporarily stepped down from their committee seats. The Bainfield connections had now spread to federal contracts, campaign bundlers, and off-the-book consulting gigs that reeked of corruption. And then came the leak. A surveillance photo. Johnson, meeting in private with the CEO of the same firm that funded the shell companies, 2 weeks before the vote he swore he wasn't influenced by. That image was damning. Undeniable. And viral. Hashtags exploded. Even members of his own party began scrubbing mentions of his name from their pages. But the moment that sealed it came Sunday morning. Speaker Mike Johnson didn't show up for his scheduled address on Capitol Hill. Instead, his office released a 94-word statement, "In light of recent distractions, and in the interest of preserving the integrity of the House, I am stepping aside from my role as Speaker, effective immediately." No press conference. No cameras. Just a quiet, humiliating exit. And as I watched the news scroll his resignation across every screen in America, one thought rang louder than the rest: this wasn't just about a lie. This was about who finally had the courage to say it out loud. Capitol Hill was quieter on Monday. Not in volume, but in energy. The kind of silence that follows a political earthquake. The kind where everyone walks a little slower, talks a little softer, and glances over their shoulder before entering any closed-door meeting. Mike Johnson's office had been cleared out overnight. His nameplate removed. Just a clean wall and a locked door. Inside the chamber, no one mentioned him. Not even the allies who used to shout his praises. A new vote for interim speaker was scheduled. Deals were being cut in real time. And I was already on to the next file. Because exposing Johnson was never about personal vengeance, it was about accountability. About showing that no one, no matter how high their title or how rehearsed their sound bites, is above truth. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside into the heat of the D.C. summer. Reporters swarmed, but I kept walking. One of them shouted, "Congresswoman Crockett, how does it feel to bring down a speaker?" I paused. That wasn't me. That was the truth. I just gave it a mic. I thought Johnson's resignation would be the end. But it was just the beginning of the cleanup. By Tuesday, the House Ethics Committee had launched a broader investigation, now dubbed Operation Capitol Veil. The web of donors, shell firms, and pay-to-play politics ran deeper than we thought. 5 more representatives were named. 2 lobbyists were indicted. And the whispers? They weren't whispers anymore. People started coming to me. Anonymous staffers. Former consultants. Even a few Republican members, privately, off the record. They wanted to talk. Because they knew the system had rotted far beyond one man. But with every file that landed on my desk came something else: threats. Blocked numbers. Hand-delivered envelopes with no return address. A black SUV idling too long outside my apartment one night. They wanted me to stop. To back off now that Johnson was gone. But I couldn't. Because the lie Johnson told was just the mask. And the real face of corruption? It was still in the building. I didn't sleep much the night before the final hearing. Too many files. Too many names. Too many shadows still hiding behind titles, committees, and campaign smiles. But when I walked into the oversight chamber that morning, I wasn't alone. Half the room was filled with citizens, young activists, retired government workers, even some former whistleblowers, sitting silently, watching. Waiting to see if the truth would actually matter this time. I stood before the committee, documents in hand, and spoke clearly. What happened with Mike Johnson wasn't an exception. It was a blueprint, used by more than just him. If we don't face it now, we're saying it's acceptable. And I won't let that happen. I laid down the evidence. 6 names. 3 companies. Millions in misappropriated influence. The committee voted unanimously to move forward with criminal referrals. Outside, the cameras were already rolling. But I didn't speak to them. Instead, I spoke to the next generation watching this unfold, on phones, in classrooms, on live streams. Power means nothing if it protects lies. And leadership means nothing if it fears the truth. I walked down the Capitol steps as the sun cut through the clouds overhead. Mike Johnson was gone. But the fight? It had just begun.